Today we're going to be covering lessons 10 and 11, in which we're going to be looking at some of the display and print settings, and then functions are the things that we're going to be looking at. We're going to show how to display the formulas on the spreadsheet as opposed to just seeing them in the formula bar. We're going to talk about changing the orientation of the printout. We're going to talk about something called print titles and what that is, and show you how to make sure that you can center your page when it gets printed, center it both vertically and horizontally on the page. In the second chapter, we're going to be dealing with Autosum. That's a review. We've talked about that before, but then we're going to introduce Autosum using average, maximum, and minimum, which are other functions on that Autosum. And then we're going to look at that insert function button itself and how I could insert any function into Excel. To open the file, we're in lesson 10. We're going to go to page 418. Page 418, and here's the Excel file that we could open. Alternatively, we could go to Class Files, IIT, Excel, and Chapter 1, and I can come down to the E10 try file and open that file up. I'm going to enable the editing. Now we need to save this file to our Documents folder. I am going to create a new folder with today's date. And then adding my initials to the end of that file name. Alright, with our file open, the first thing I need you to do is scroll down to row 105. Row 105. I just want that to be visible on your screen. And on this row, you're going to see that there are several numbers, and each one of these numbers has a formula associated with it, or a function. Looking at the formula bar, you will see for C105, for example, there is this formula. What I want to be able to do temporarily is I want to be able to see my formulas on the screen without having to click on it and look in the formula bar. Well, that's just a setting that I can turn the formulas on or off on the spreadsheet. So this is going to be a new tab we haven't used before called the Formulas tab. So let's click on Formulas. And we're going to find this button that says Show Formulas. And when we look at Show Formulas, or when we click on that button, I can now see the formulas instead of the answers to the formulas. Now, you may wonder why that is important. Well, if you have a mistake on your spreadsheet and you show the formulas, you will notice that these formulas form a pattern. See how this is average of F4 to F101, G4 to G101, H4 to H101. You can see there's a pattern here. And so if you're looking for a possible mistake and you can see the formulas, sometimes you can see where there's a break in the pattern. Now, once you're done observing these formulas, we can turn those formulas back off by clicking on that same button, Show Formulas, and that puts the spreadsheet back into its normal regular view. I'd like to go to the top of this spreadsheet now. I'm going to do that by, on my keyboard, I'm going to press Control Home. Control Home will move me to the top of the spreadsheet. And I'd like to take a look at how this would print out. So I'm going to go to my File menu, File, Print, and this is a print preview of what it would look like. And so on page 1 of a printout, and notice there's going to be 7 pages. Okay. On page 1, I'm going to see this information. Going to page 2, as you saw, the spreadsheet was rather long. Now, when we get to page 4, notice what happens. See this blue line that indicates the top of the data? Basically, we've got quite a bit of information that's spreading across lots of spreadsheets here. Okay, with the last page, page 7, just having this little bit of information. So what we want to do is we want to try to get this to print a little bit better for us. In this print preview section, notice that there is this thing called scaling at the very bottom. Okay, right now it's set to no scaling. Now guys, there is a setting called fit sheet on one page. You never really want to do this because if you've got a large spreadsheet like this, it's going to shrink everything down so it fits on one page, and that's not a great idea. But what we can do, and the most common thing that's done here, is the fit all columns on one page. Okay? In other words, what it's going to do is it's going to shrink the text down so that the column widths fit on one page. So I'm going to click on this button. Now I'm going to go back up to page 1. Okay, so now my text is shrunk so that all the columns fit on a single page. Alright, but I still have 2 pages. Okay, so in other words, yes, the columns fit on one page, but I still have many more rows than what will fit on one page. So there's going to be multiple pages in that regard. A lot of people get confused by that. Well, one of the things that I want to do is I want to change this so that this text is kind of small right now. And in order for it not to be quite as small, I want to make my page wider. Okay? If I'm going to fit the columns to one page and I got a lot of columns, one of the things that I may want to do is change my orientation. I can change from portrait orientation to landscape orientation right over here while still in print preview mode. Now, guys, we learned in Word that if you go to page layout, you can change the orientation. And that's fine. You can do that as well. But you can also do it while in the print preview using this landscape orientation. Now the text is not quite as small. Notice that it does go on 3 pages. As you would expect, the text is larger now. So it's carrying over onto 3 pages. Here I am on page 2 of my print preview. And so let's say I was looking here at one of these numbers, and I wanted to know what this number related to. Okay? Remember, we've got all these different columns, and so these numbers reflect something in a column. Well, the only way we would know that is by going up to page 1, because page 1 has my column headers. Alright? And so I really won't know what the numbers mean on the other pages if I don't have those column headers on these other pages. So what I want to do is I want to set this up so that I can see those column headers on every single page. To do that, I'm going to get out of my print preview. I'm going to go back to my regular menu. And we're going to go to page layout. And on the page layout tab, this is in page setup. Page setup all relates to printing settings and how this is going to print out. There's this thing called print titles. Titles are the things that appear at the top of every page. Now, it's a little different than a header or footer. Okay, a header specifically is stuff that prints at the top of every page, yes, but a print title is where I have a row in my spreadsheet that I want to print on every page. So I'm going to click here on print titles. Once the dialog box opens, I want to call your attention to this print area. I guarantee you half of you are going to make this mistake later on, in that you're going to try to make changes into this print area. This is not where we want to go. All print titles did, when I opened up the print titles dialog box by clicking on here, is it opened me to the correct spot in the dialog box, because as you can see right here is my print titles area. Now, in this case, I want my rows to repeat at the top. So I'm going to click on rows to repeat at top. I'm going to click in the second box right here. And I could type in a 3 here. In reality, I would have to type in a 3:3 is what I'm supposed to type. But I really don't have to worry about that, because notice these little red arrows here. What these red arrows mean means that I can actually take my mouse and click on the spreadsheet and it'll automatically put that data in. So I'm going to take my mouse, I'm going to click on the number 3, and notice that it puts in that 3:3 that I said that really was supposed to be typed in there. What this is telling Excel is to print row 3 at the top of every page. Now, let's take a look at this and see what it looks like. I could click OK and then do File Print, or I can click right on Print Preview, and that pretty much clicks the OK button and then takes me into the Print Preview. Well, in my Print Preview, the first page looks the same. There's nothing really different there. But if I go to page 2, now you will see that the headings, specifically row 3, prints on this page. Going to page 3, I see the same thing. So, what we did is we did print titles. We told it the row to print on. Let's just review this. We went to print titles. We went to the rows to repeat at top. And then we clicked on the row or rows if you want multiple rows to print at the top. You select those rows. When done, we click OK. The last thing I want to do, and I really needed to be back in that print preview, so I should have hit print preview. The last thing I want to do is sometimes you may want to center your document in the middle of the page. Alright? You want to center your document in the middle of the page. Well, the way I can do that back on my menu is I go into my page setup settings. Again, I'm on page layout, page setup, opening up the dialog box. Alright? One of the things that I want to do is I want to center my page horizontally and vertically. If you look at the print preview here, you will see that what's printing is in the top left corner. If you come to where it says center on page, center horizontally, you'll see that it moves it to the middle of the page. Vertically moves it vertically to the center of the page. Now I'm going to click on Print Preview again, just so that I can go straight from my dialog box to my Print Preview. Now you're not going to see any change on page 1 really. In fact, you're not even going to see anything different on page 2 because both of these pages were already pretty much filled. But on page 3, you will notice that the information is now centered on the page. So, centering on the page is done through the Page Setup dialog box, the Margins tab, and then checking off horizontally and vertically if you want to center right in the middle of the page. I click OK. That pretty much wraps it up for the first lesson here. So I'm going to go to File and Save to save this file. And we're going to go ahead and close this file out and get ready to move to the next lesson. As we start lesson 11, we're going to need to open the files for lesson 11. Those files are going to be on pages 429, 429. Now you will need to scroll down a little bit most likely on this, and here you will see the Excel file, the E11 try A file that you need to open. If you wish to open from your desktop, you can go to Class Files, IIT, Excel. Now, starting in Lesson 11, we are in Chapter 2. So we're going to go to the Chapter 2 folder and find the E11 try A file. Once that file is open, we're going to enable the editing, and we're going to save this to that dated folder that we created earlier in the lesson. So go into that dated folder that you created earlier in the lesson and add your initials to the end of that file name. Now, at this point, let me zoom in a little bit here. At this point, I'd like you to go to cell B10, and what I wish to do here is I wish to add up all these January numbers. To make this happen, since we are adding, at this point when we start saying the word add, you should be thinking Autosum. Okay? Autosum is the quick way to add a group of numbers together, so I'm going to click on Autosum. I look for the dotted line to see where it's running. If it's running around the numbers I wish to add, which it is, then I've got the numbers that I want. B5 to B9 is correct, so I'm pressing the Enter key on my keyboard. Now, you may remember in a previous lesson I had mentioned something about these number signs. What these number signs simply mean is that the number that is to be displayed is wider than the column right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my mouse and I'm going to point between the B and the C, and I'm going to double click. Now, if on your screen you added those numbers up and the number signs didn't appear, that's perfectly fine. Sometimes it has to do with the screen resolution, and I am zoomed in very close. So that might have been the thing that was causing the issue. Alright, to practice this a few more times, I'm going to go ahead and come to the February column, specifically C10. I want to add those numbers up, so I go to Autosum, check the dotted line to see where it's running. It is running around the correct numbers, so I press Enter. On my screen, because the number signs are showing, I am going to double click between the C and the D. Going to column D, D10, I Autosum, check the dotted line, it's going around the right numbers, I press enter, I auto adjust or auto fit, double click between the D and the E, and then the final column, quarter 1. Okay, I want to add those numbers up, Autosum, it's adding those numbers up, I press enter, I resize the column. Now, let's go to cell B12. Cell B12. Here, they want me to calculate an average. So, as we've discussed in the past, there is other options under Autosum. So with my cursor in cell B12, I click the drop down for Autosum, and I find the calculation that they're wanting me to do, in this case, average. So I click on that average option. At this point, it's selecting all of these cells. And I can tell you right now that these are not the right numbers to average because they include the total. You never, ever, ever include a total in your average amount. So what I want to do is I want to average all of the individual numbers. So how do I make the dotted line appear around the correct item? Well, I simply take my mouse, I point to the middle of cell B5, this is the first cell I want averaged, and I hold down my mouse and I drag down to B9. So I've selected from B5 down to B9. The dotted line is now around the January numbers that I wish to average, so I press the Enter key. Repeating that process, I'm going to go to the February column, C12. I'm going to calculate the average. I'm going to use Autosum, calculate the average. Notice that it's definitely going around the wrong number now. Alright, so I need to tell it that I want to average my February numbers. So I'm going to point to this 27,943. I'm going to drag down, selecting from C5 down to C9. These are the numbers in February that I wish to average. It does not include the total. I press enter. Now I'm going to stop at that point as it relates to average. We'll deal with the other two cells in a minute. Let's go to cell B13. In cell B13, I wish to average these same numbers. Excuse me, not average. I wish to find the maximum. The maximum is going to find the largest number. So once again, we're going to go to our Autosum feature. Click the drop down on Autosum. I'm not summing. I'm not averaging. We're not doing a count. We're looking for the max number. It has made a guess. That guess is incorrect. This is not the numbers that I'm looking at. So I want to point, in this case, to cell B5. This is the first number I want it to look at. I want it to drag down to B9. I'm looking from B5 to B9. I want it to find the largest number in that group of 5 numbers. I press the Enter key. Let's go to cell C13. I'm going to do the same thing, but for the February numbers, I want to find the maximum value for the February numbers. So I click the drop down and go to Max and select all of those February numbers. Again, C5 to C9. Once the dotted line is running around the correct numbers, I press Enter. Let's go to minimum for a moment. Clicking on the minimum for January, this is going to give me the smallest number. So here in cell B14, I click the drop down for Autosum. I'm going to choose the minimum, the smallest value. The dotted line It's around the wrong numbers. It guessed incorrectly. So I'm going to come up here to January. Okay, I'm going to select from B5 down to B9. The dotted lines are running around the correct numbers. I press enter. Go to cell C14. Once again, choose my minimum values. Autosum, minimum values. This time I'm selecting my February numbers, C5 to C9. Okay. Press enter. And now I have these numbers in place. Now we're going to go to cell B15, and in cell B15 I'm going to look over here into my A column to see what type of function they want me to use, and this time they wish me to use a function called median. What a median function does, for those of you who don't know it from math, is it finds the middle number. If you were going to do this manually, what you would do is you would take all of your numbers and put them in order so that the smallest number was at the top, the largest number was at the bottom, and then you would literally pick the middle number, and that is the median number. Now, we have 5 numbers, so that works easily. If you had 6 numbers, there is no middle number. Okay, so what you would have to do is average the 2 numbers that were in the middle. Again, that's just how median is calculated. That's how you would do it if you were doing this by hand. But the beauty is that Excel is going to do the calculation for us, so we don't have to go through that trouble. So here I am in cell B15, and I want to calculate a median. Well, I'm going to go up to Autosum and click the drop-down arrow, because most of the time what you're going to need is going to be on this list, but as you can see, there's no option for median. Median, unfortunately, is not the same as count numbers. It's the only one that we haven't talked about yet. We will get to it at some point. Okay? So what we need to do is go into this More Functions button. Now, I do want to make note of something. This is the More Functions button. Basically, it brings me to this insert function. I'm going to temporarily cancel out of this for a second. If you want to keep it on your screen, you can, okay, because we are coming right back to it. But I just want to demonstrate that there are 2 ways, there's more than 2, but there's 2 basic ways to get here. One we just looked at, and that's the Autosum and More Functions. Now, if you know for a fact that the function you're going to want to use is not on Autosum, okay, what I can use is this FX button, this Insert Function button right here. Insert Function takes me immediately to that same dialog box. So basically, it saves you a click, but for brand new Excel users, I kind of encourage them to use that Autosum button, because a lot of times the things that you're going to be doing in Excel is going to be summing, averaging, counting, min or max. And so if those are the functions you're using, they're right there. If they're not, then you can come in here and come to the same Insert Function button. Alright, so I'm in my Insert Function button, and I know the function I want. I want this function called median. So the easiest way to find the median function is to type it right here in this space that says type a brief description of what you want. So I'm going to type in median, M-E-D-I-A-N, and click Go. Once I do that, you will see that the median function does appear. So with median selected, now there are others that are there, but the one I want is median, so with it selected, I click OK. Now, at this point, it's asking me for function arguments. This is, if you will, think about those dotted lines that we would see with Autosum. This is kind of like Excel's guess as to the numbers they want us to calculate the median for. Now those numbers are not the correct numbers, so what we're going to do is take our mouse and select the numbers that I do want to calculate the median for. So in this case, we're in the B column, so I'm going to come here to B5, and I'm going to drag my mouse down to B9. Once I've dragged from B5 to B9, okay, you'll see the dotted line going around the numbers that you've selected. That's what you want to see. The numbers have been pre-filled into our dialog box. That's perfect. Guys, you should really never type in here, alright, unless there are a few functions that require you to type something in because it's not actually going to be found on the spreadsheet. We'll get to those in the future. Okay, but generally speaking, in this dialog box, where it's asking for arguments, you're going to want to just simply select the items on the spreadsheet. I click OK. It has now calculated a median value. Alright, now if you look up on the formula bar, you'll see that it has indeed calculated something called a median. Let's repeat that process one more time. I am in cell C15, and once again I want to calculate a median, but this time it's going to be for the February numbers. So I'm going to go to my Autosum drop-down. Median is not on my list. Okay, now I might have already known that, so I could have gone to the FX. If you went there, that's perfectly fine. But I'm coming to Autosum. Median's not on my list, so I'm going to go to More Functions. Now median is going to now display here because it's a recently used function. Okay, whenever you use a function, it will then appear on this list. If median was not in the list, I would type in median up here, click go. That now displays the median function. I click OK. I now need to select the cells, just moving this to the side so that I can see my C column. Pointing to the C column, I'm going to go to C5, select down to C9. I'm selecting my February numbers that I want to calculate the median for. I click OK. I can see that it has indeed calculated a value. I look on my formula bar, and yes, it is a median function. Now, we have calculated those values for January and February. Now, I want to go back and remind you of how we can easily do our March and Q1 functions. What I want to do is I'm going to come to cell C12, and I'm going to take my mouse and select down to cell C15. Now, I want to put out a word of caution here. Some people are getting in the habit of using that fill handle to select cells. Do not use that fill handle to select cells. Take your mouse, point in the middle of the cell, drag down to select. So we've selected from C12 to C15. Now, I wish to copy these functions, okay, the average, the max, the min, and the median, over to the other two columns. So with all of the functions selected, I can use my fill handle, because I now wish to copy, so I am going to use that fill handle. I'm going to drag my fill handle over two columns. Once my mouse has filled in through the E column, I let go of the mouse and it fills in numbers. Now I want to do a quick spot check. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click here in cell E12, and I want to make sure that it's calculating an average. It is. And is it averaging my E numbers? And yes, it is. coming down to the next cell, okay, cell E13, okay. I want it to be calculating a maximum. It is calculating a max, and it is calculating it for these E column numbers. So quick check for minimum value, the E column numbers, that's correct. And then finally the median function, that's what I'm looking for. And again, the E column numbers. So it looks like we've got good solid functions that are doing our calculations for us for this particular spreadsheet. Let's save our work, clicking on the Save button to save that work. Now this next thing is not something you're going to see on a test because there's no way that it can be tested really, but I want to demonstrate something that is kind of a useful feature. Let's say that I wanted to add up a group of numbers, but I didn't necessarily want it to appear. I just wanted to see what the total was. If you take your mouse and you select a group of numbers, I randomly picked my D column here, so from D5 to D9 is what I've selected. So I've selected the D5 column, and we know that it adds up to the 122,280 because right here is the calculation telling us that. But if I just wanted to add these numbers up without actually having it appear on the screen, I just want to know what the sum was. Well, if you look at the bottom on your status bar, this green bar at the bottom of your screen, notice these what are called auto calculation values. You'll notice a sum, and that sum, the 122,280, is indeed the same number that we see for the calculated. So if I just wanted to look and see what a group of numbers added together came out to be, I could select those numbers and it would tell me. Okay. Also, it shows me a count, telling me that 5 numbers are selected, and it calculates out the average for me. And if you look and see, this 24,456 does indeed correspond to our average for the March amount. Again, you're not going to see this on a test, but just to let you know that there is this visual way of getting a sum, a count of cells selected, and you know what, let me back up on that. That is not a count of cells selected, that's a count of numbers selected. In this case, all the cells we selected were numbers, so that's why it's counted all the cells. Okay, so I want to make a clarification there. And then our average. Just as another side note, if you right-click on this sum, you can choose to activate other items such as the maximum value, the minimum value. Alright, so if I do that, I will see my max and my min values also appearing down here. So right-clicking down on this status bar lets me turn some of these items on or off if I wished to do so. That does bring us to the end of this particular lesson. So let's save this file, clicking the Save button, and we can close out of this file, and that will need to be turned into ngrade once you get done with the apply files for this lesson. In this lesson, we showed you how to display the formulas on the spreadsheet by going to the Formulas tab on the ribbon and clicking on that button that says Show Formulas. We changed the orientation of our document. You can either do that through the print preview or page layout. We talked about print titles. That's where you have a row that needs to be printed at the top of every page. And we found that also under page layout. We used the print titles button. We centered vertically and horizontally by using the page setup setting. We then took a look at Autosum. Okay, we did a little bit of review calculated and added some numbers together. And then we used that Autosum to also calculate an average, a max, and a minimum value. And then finally we used the insert function button that would allow us to calculate. In this case we used it for the median, and we found that either through that fx on the formula bar, or we could use the Autosum and just choose more functions, and that would accomplish the same goal. So these were the tasks that we did for lessons 10 and 11.